Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. The Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore gained an experienced new superintendent this past May. He has dedicated his life to our country's parks and brings his passion for conservation to Northwest Indiana. Here to discuss his plans and projects for the dunes is Paul Labovitz, the superintendent of the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Keith. Thank you.
You know, actually, what's really cool is you've got the perfect name for living in Northwest Indiana. I mean, you fit right in with everybody else around here, I think. So that's a name that comes from?
Well, my background, I was mostly Irish, believe it or not.
Really?
But my father's side is from Eastern Europe.
Okay, a lot of Eastern Europeans
Yes.
here, and we're proud of all of them.
Yeah.
So, you've been with the Park Service 26 years or so, and just tell me, what's the most exciting thing that's ever happened to you while you were in the Park Service?
Boy, that's a great question. Just about everything that's happened to me has been exciting, but I've seen things like a moose swimming across a bay at Isle Royale in Lake Superior, wolf cubs at Voyageurs National Park, bald eagles in downtown Minneapolis at the Mississippi National River. I mean, it's hard to pin it down.
You haven't had like where you were hanging by your fingernails from a cliff or a
No.
glacier or anything like that?
No, although I was at Glacier National Park and I was hiking with a group of folks from Europe who I was taking on a tour of some parks, and I saw a grizzly bear across the stream below us, and I said, in a couple minutes you'll see a bear come out in this clearing, and a couple minutes later the bear came out into the clearing, and I was,
And they thought you were a hero, right?
You bet.
You just sense this, right?
Yes, we know where all the bears are.
Now you brought your hat with you today, which is really kind of a cool hat. Now, are you required to take that with you all the time? Is that
Have to have this on my head whenever I'm outside in uniform.
Really?
And this is the winter hat. We have a summer hat, which is a straw hat. Very iconic for the National Park Service.
So that's a cool hat. Well, do you think it's a cool hat?
I think it's a cool hat. It's actually quite a warm hat.
It sounds like there's a butt behind it or something.
I suspect there's room to improve the National Park Service hat to reflect changes in technology with hat construction.
But people love these hats.
People love the hat. They love the National Park Ranger uniform.
Really?
Yes.
So that's never really changed?
Slightly, but it's been like this for quite a long time.
If you could vote, would you change it?
I think we need to take advantage of the advances in textile industry. I'll say that.
Okay, we'll leave it at that because you might have some superior watching this show going, love this uniform.
This is a very touchy subject in the National Park Service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you've been with, your most recent venue was in Minnesota?
Yes, I was the superintendent at a place called the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area.
Now, is that where the Mississippi starts?
Actually, no. It's there's still another 400 miles of Mississippi River above where I was. We were in the Twin Cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, but it was the national park about the Mississippi River.
So is that downtown Minneapolis?
Yes. It was 72 miles of the river, and it was centered Minneapolis, St. Paul.
So what's there at that park?
Well, the only waterfall in the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River changes very dramatically in that short stretch from a prairie river to a waterfall and gorge to the big, wide floodplain river that everyone knows.
Wow.
It all happens right there.
So why did you come here? I mean, how does that work with the National Park Service? You put your name in the hat, so to speak, or
Yes.
do you bid for these jobs, or how does that
Well,
work?
my predecessor retired, and there was a vacancy announcement, and I applied for the job and successfully competed for it.
So I assume, and I won't ask you, that there are some assignments that are like, those are the best assignments, and there's some like, oh my gosh, that's not a great assignment to have. So how does the dunes rank?
It's just like every other job. There's a lot of folks in the Park Service who really like the big, we call them the Y parks, Yellowstone, Yosemite, the big wild places in the middle of nowhere. My career has been in urban parks, parks that are close to or in places where people live. There's some folks that prefer to work at Civil War themed parks. There's some folks that prefer to work in certain parts of the country, or Alaska or Hawaii. So it's really hard to say. I was excited. I came here on a temporary assignment a year ago before I applied for the job and thought it'd be a nice place to experience, but I'm not sure I would want to work there. And after 3 days here, I realized I'd be crazy not to want to come here and work all the time.
This is one of the biggest urban type parks or parks near a city, right?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of national parks that are close to urban areas. Indiana Dunes is one of those, and it's one of the larger ones.
Yeah. Acreage here is about how many acres?
About 15,000 acres.
I mean, that is huge, right? 15,000.
You know, Yellowstone is 2 million acres.
Okay,
You
so
know,
compared, it seems small, right?
But you know, when you talk about 15,000 acres in this part of the country that's protected by the National Park Service, that's a lot of land.
Yeah, because if someone had a farm that had 15,000 acres, that would be a giant farm,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Huge farm. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there's many parcels that make up the National Lakeshore. I mean, you guys stretch down into other parts of Lake County. Where are some of the remote pieces of the park?
Oh, you know, the Gaylord Butterfly Prairie, the Hobart Prairie, we have Pinhook Bog in LaPorte County, which are detached from the main body of land that we own along the lakeshore.
But it's still part of what you oversee.
Yeah, one of the challenges here at the lakeshore is that our boundary is very complicated.
Okay. And you got about 100 employees or so, but which are responsible for how many million visitors each year?
Between 2 and 3 million people a year visit the Indiana Dunes Lakeshore. It's one of the most visited national parks in the country.
Why do people not know that? Have you kind of figured that out yet? People around here don't seem to know the magnitude of this park. Why is that?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I was just talking about this earlier today. Never went to see the Liberty Bell or Independence Hall the whole time I lived there. I think people tend to not be familiar with things like the Indiana Dunes Lakeshore that are just familiar to them, but yet we have people from all over the world that visit this park every day.
It's just kind of, you don't know what's in your own backyard.
You just
don't
sort of take for
appreciate it.
granted what's local. You know, when I was in the Twin Cities, it was the Mississippi River. I mean, what could be more exciting in America than the Mississippi River? And yet local folks wasn't that big a
Drive
deal.
over the bridge, right? I mean, that's all
It
they're
was
going
just
to do.
sort of in the way for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But, you know, people from all over the world would come there to see the Mississippi River.
So is that one of the challenges here, trying to get more even local people to really appreciate and kind of partner with this park?
Yes, you know, we talked about urban national parks, and most people do not associate the National Park Service with urban areas. They think of the more traditional Glacier, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Everglades. What they don't know, there's 401 national parks across the country. And parks like Indiana Dunes and Golden Gate National Recreation Area are embedded either right in or very close to large populated places. And they are not what most people think of when they think of a national park. Yet the Indiana Dunes is a nationally significant place, not just for the recreation opportunities, but for, you know, very spectacular plant diversity.
So this park ranks what number in terms of visitors? It's like
It's in the top 10.
top 10. Wow, that's amazing. And I've heard this diversity thing many times, but I always love sharing that story. So what's your diversity statistics about the park?
This national park is 7th in the national park system for ecological diversity, and mostly plant life. We have over almost 1,200 different species of plants growing here naturally.
Now, why is that? Because when you go through the park, for those who've visited the park, you're going to go, my gosh, there's cactus here, and there's, you know, just, why is that biodiversity there?
You know, location, location, location. We're at the very bottom of the Great Lakes. We're at the very eastern edge of what was the tallgrass prairie. We're at the very western edge of the eastern deciduous forest. So we have southern species that meet northern species, eastern species that meet western species. All these ecozones overlap right here, and that's why we have that kind of plant diversity.
And I assume part of that's just wind and water have brought things to
Yes.
this area,
Yes.
and they've kind of crossed over each other.
And think about that diversity yet today scattered amongst part of the largest metropolitan area, one of the largest in the country. We have a couple of steel mills and power plants as neighbors. We have highways and railroads. There's a lot of human activity here, and yet we still have this biological diversity.
Right. Makes you wonder how many things get carried by a train car or something that kind of.
Well,
came through
and this is
carrying.
natural stuff. This is not
Right.
the invasive stuff that comes in on trains or on the soles of people's shoes.
Right. So, in all the years you've been in the Park Service, you've probably done something or been around something that just inspired you or just, you know, really kind of moved you. What was that?
The things that, I'm a city kid. I grew up in Philadelphia, and was not connected at all to nature and outdoor recreation. So the things that inspire me today still are when we as the National Park Service with some of our partners, and we have a lot of great partners, can connect a kid or even an adult to their own community. I see kids almost every day when I'm out looking at programs who you can see when the light bulb goes off that they've experienced something that they had no clue existed. And it transforms them. It makes them think about where their water comes from, where clean air comes from.
I know what that feels like because we had one of the youth in our youth leadership program recently come up, and we were at the Portage Riverwalk. And she actually was from down south on the farms, and she had actually never come up to the lakeshore. And she was like, oh my gosh, look at this lake. And she was just so excited about it. And that is really neat to see when the kids, and you see a lot of kids do that, right?
Yeah, we're involved in a program. We started this back in the Twin Cities. It was called the Urban Wilderness Canoe Adventure, the UWCA. And if you're familiar with the paddling sports, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area was nirvana for canoeists and kayakers. So we stole the acronym, we put Urban Wilderness Canoe Adventure, and we used Voyager canoes to introduce kids to the Mississippi River. Wow. And we would have groups of maybe 50 to 200 kids at a time in big 10-passenger canoes, and every day we would watch kids go from petrified to laughing and splashing to coming out of the canoes telling us that was the best day of their lives.
Wow, that has got to be
Can't
inspiring.
beat that. So we brought those canoes to Northwest Indiana for 3 years now, for a couple weeks at a time, and we've had a couple thousand of our local kids out on Trail Creek, the East Branch of the Calumet River in Lake Michigan, enjoying that same experience.
So since you've been here, what have you seen as like a real challenge? I mean, it's like, man, this is a challenge facing me here.
The challenge is that nobody knows that we're here.
Okay.
Everybody knows that they use the beach, they enjoy the park that way, but they come and go, and I wonder how many of those 2 to 3 million people have never realized they visited a national park.
Now this has to be an interesting balance because your job is to preserve the beauty and the natural parts of that park, yet you're also trying to get people to come in, which affect that natural beauty in some ways. You want more visitors, but in some ways those visitors really create problems.
Yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum, right? The phrase used to be loving the parks to death. If we're really successful at attracting people in, will those people ultimately destroy the core values of the park? So it is a balance. But the dunes have been used by people for, maybe 11,000 years. They change every day. We have steel mills, power plants. We have the Port of Indiana as neighbors. There's a lot of human activity there. We're lucky that we are in a place that can support a lot of recreational use. So our job is to balance the use and the preservation so that the resources of the park are here forever.
So when the rangers and the park staff can sit around and have a few moments to talk, what are the things that humans do that really aggravate you, really irritate you? What are they doing?
Yeah, it's kind of the classic stuff. We have litter problems. People just throw their litter on the ground.
I don't get that.
I don't get it either, but we have some seasonal folks every summer spend their entire work summer picking up trash. I don't understand it, but that aggravates me.
Is there anything else that humans do that you all sit around and just say,
well,
wow?
We have been trained as society to want to be able to drive up to where we want to go. Mm-hmm. We don't want to walk. We don't want to take a shuttle or any kind of a transit option. We want to be able to drive a car right to the place where we want to get out and maybe take a picture. And so in the summer, there's a handful of weekends every summer where the traffic is just unbelievable to the point where we will say, if you're thinking of coming to visit, don't come on the 4th of July because it's just too crowded.
Too many people.
Yeah.
Now you'll often hear people say, when you go into the park, don't pick anything, don't take anything from the park. I mean, is that real important? Because people are like, I want to take this flower, I want to take this thing.
Yeah, so think about I had a friend in Europe who showed me a round rock that she had taken from Arches National Park, about the size of a baseball, perfectly round red rock. And I thought, you know, if that park gets 1 million people a year, and each one of those, or half of them, take a rock that size, the hole in that park will be as big as this room every year. Petrified forest loses tons of petrified wood every year to people who take it home illegally. If people pick flowers, the flower is what creates seeds, which is what propagates the species. You can see where that's going. We let people, if you see a blueberry or a raspberry, you're allowed to pick it and eat it. It's not a problem.
But how about sand? That's what the dunes have, is sand. So is it going to affect anything if people take a little bottle of sand?
You know, my guess is don't take a bottle of sand, just shake it out of your shoes at the end of the day.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
So what projects are in front of you? I mean, when you came here, you go, okay, these are the things I got to take care of.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
got to fix.
how much time do we have? Yeah, we have
Maybe 5 minutes left.
Yeah, well, we have a long list
maybe
of great projects, but continuing to improve and increase the amount of youth engagement we do. We have a partner called the Dunes Learning Center, Residential Environmental Education Center. They're completely booked. We need to increase their capacity to serve more students. We have a lot of historic structures, old buildings that we've acquired that really need to be restored and adaptively reused and sort of put back in circulation so that they're continued to be preserved, but also part of the community.
And the Chelberg Farm is one of those,
Shelburne
right?
Farm is one of those properties, exactly.
And kind of what happened over these past few years, because it was kind of put dormant for a while. And
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where the National Park Service had a farmer essentially on staff. That person retired. The way the budgets have been, we manage our budget by not filling positions when people leave. We're down about 30% where we were 10 years ago.
so what has changed now that's going to bring that you want to do something with the Chelberg Farm?
Well, so Shelburne Farm, we have a request for proposals that's active right now. We're waiting for anyone, a nonprofit, a private individual, to recommend or propose something to us that we could lease the property to them with some conditions that reflect the National Park Service mission, and that maybe that partnership with another entity could then help achieve the preservation goals of that property, but also bring it back to life, so to speak.
Since you've been here, and it's been 6 months, 7 months, what haven't you figured out yet? What do you still like, I need to figure this out, or I got to get a better grasp of this?
It's hard to understand just exactly what you can do where on the beaches. Where can you have a dog on a leash? Where can you not have a dog on a leash? You know, that kind of stuff. It's very confusing. One of the things that we're starting to work on is just how to get people to the beaches. When you're driving on State Route 12, there's very little signage that tells you make a left here or a right here, and it'll take you to the. We just put a sign up for Camel Beach to address that very issue. So we're working on that.
And then you hear the reputation of some of those communities up there. Sounds like don't come in our community here to get to the beach, right?
So I've had people say to me, clearly enough people know where the beaches are. There's no reason to point people in that direction. But from a visitor perspective, if you're here for the first time and you really don't know where you're going, we ought to do a little better job at helping people find their way to where they need to be. I've stopped. I see people all the time in a car, usually out-of-state plates, with a park map saying, I have no idea where I'm at.
Right.
And the new guy's got to help direct them.
Yeah, and you guys have a great map available at all the tourism centers to pick up in this region. It's a great map of all the trails and everything. So Mount Baldy has been shut down for a while. We had a near tragedy. It was a miracle that kid was saved. So what's happening there that's going to open that back up for us?
Well, we're working on understanding what this hazard is, and the theory seems to be that the trees were covered by sand, the trees rotted, left a void, a very fragile void that on occasion are exposed when wind moves the sand from the top. And this boy was, when he was hiking in an area that we had closed because we were doing some vegetation restoration, he saw this hole and he thought, well, I wonder how deep this hole is, and it collapsed around him. Luckily, he's fine. But it caused us to sort of pause and say, what's going on here? We're in the process of understanding that. We hope to have no promises, but limited public access back at Mount Baldy this next warm weather season.
And you can't just drag a backhoe out there and dig it up and try to figure out what's going on, right?
No, I mean,
You gotta do it.
the whole instance was a symptom of a larger issue with the way sand is moving along the lakefront and inland. There's been a lot of changes in with the port construction, the marina at Michigan City, other structures on the Lake Michigan coast have changed the way sand is nourished or not nourished on beaches. So Mount Baldy, the wind is blowing the dunes south, but there's no sand being deposited on the front of it to continue building the lake side of it.
We're getting down toward the end here, but what's there to do there in the winter? Just kind of quickly, we're down to 1 minute. So.
Oh, winter, we're trying to work on that. Winter activities, winter hiking, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing when it snows, great birding even in the winter. Just some really interesting landscapes. The lake itself is very different in the winter. We're working on educating people that this is more than just a beach visit.
Wow. So if there was just one thing you want people to know in the last 10 seconds, what would it be about the National Lakeshore?
Well, there's 401 national parks. This particular park is our piece of that system, and that unlike Yellowstone, which is a great place, you could come visit our park on your lunch hour.
I like that. That could become a slogan.
Could be.
So, Paul, I'm excited to see you here and have you in our region. It looks like your leadership is going to be great for us. So thank you
Great,
for being
thanks.
on the show.
Thank
Have you ever gone through a pile of old boxes and found something that held a special place in your heart? Did you ever remodel a room and find a treasure hidden in the wall? Or were you digging in the backyard and discovered a really interesting item buried away for years? Yes, just like your place, there are overlooked, hidden, and forgotten treasures right here in our region. The biggest one is the Dunes National Lakeshore. We do overlook it. It is hard to get to in some ways, and we forget it's there. It is a precious gem carved by nature over millions of years, right here in our own backyard. It has millions of visitors annually, yet you can survey Northwest Indiana residents and find a large percentage who have never been to the dunes. An even greater size group has been there only a couple of times or not for a very long time. Don't let it be hidden away or neglected. Look at and admire this jewel regularly. Tell people about it and show it more often. Most Americans do not live near a national park of this magnitude, but we are fortunate in our region to have a gem right here in our own backyard. Thanks for watching our show. Did you learn something today? We always welcome your reactions and thoughts. You can send them to the email address which is listed on your screen. Our website is also full of exciting features. Specifically, you can watch past Lakeshore Focus episodes. Just go to www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Click on the TV, scroll down till you see my face. One more click and you can see a list of the shows. When you finish, drop me an email at focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org and say, hey Keith, I watched the show on gangs or human trafficking or the doctor in the Syrian refugee camp, and here are my thoughts. I would love to hear from you. Make sure you join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.